Hello everyone, welcome to the Popcorn Session channel. Today, we're going to follow the saga during the end of the world. Enjoy today's show, and here we go. In 2009, the most powerful solar explosions occur on our sun. So, to understand this phenomenon, the American scientist Dr. Hellman goes to India to visit his friend, the astrophysicist Synopsis. Together, they descend into a copper mine at a depth of over 3 kilometers. At that moment, Synopsis urgently shows Hellman that after the solar explosion, a stream of particles began heating the Earth's core. The situation is so serious that underground waters are already boiling due to the high temperature. According to scientists, this will inevitably lead to a global catastrophe. Afterward, Dr. Hellman urgently returned to the United States to report the impending disaster to the head of the presidential administration, a man named Call, as quickly as possible. Disregarding protocol, Hellman barges into a hotel hosting a charity event. Initially, Call ridicules his concern, but after reading the report, he realizes that the matter is indeed serious. He rushes Hellman to meet with the President of the United States, Thomas Wilson. Almost a year passes, and the President of the United States is speaking at the G8 summit, sharing classified information with world leaders about the imminent end of the world. Immediately after this, the construction of gigantic ships begins in the Tibet Valley, on which the chosen ones can take refuge and survive the cataclysm. To make space for construction, the valley's inhabitants are relocated to other settlements. They are convinced that a dam is being built in the valley, and information about the end of the world is carefully concealed, with only those with construction experience being invited to stay. The year is now 2011, and they continue to hide the terrible truth from the common people. But the oligarchs are secretly buying tickets for the arks. The ticket costs 1 billion euros. Already in 2012, on the day before the global catastrophe, a science fiction writer from Los Angeles named Jackson Curtis, like the overwhelming majority of people, is unaware of the impending disaster. He rushes to his ex-wife's house to pick up the kids for the weekend and take them to the park. Meanwhile, a small earthquake occurs in the city, and a crack appears in the pavement. But people continue not to notice what is happening, always with a dark and careless sense of humor. Jackson dedicates a lot of time to writing and hardly communicates with his children. So they are getting closer to their mother's new boyfriend, the plastic surgeon Gordon. Jackson understands that taking the kids to the park is a chance to bond with them. On the same morning, Dr. Hellman and Call visit the president to discuss the concerning geological situation in California. Hellman believes that the Earth's core is heating up much faster than his calculations predicted, and perhaps the evacuation needs to start much earlier than he anticipated. To gather additional data, Hellman, along with a group of military personnel and researchers, heads to Yellowstone, which, for those who don't know, is a supervolcano spanning 3 states in the
Jackson e as
United
crianças
States.
vão até um lago conhecido, mas ficam surpresos pois o lago repentinamente secou. Neste momento, eles são notados pelos militares e levados para longe do lugar perigoso para uma base militar. Aqui o Dr. Helmsley encontra Jackson e as crianças. Ele mente que está liderando uma expedição geológica comum e que nada de terrível está acontecendo. Durante a conversa, Helmsley reconhece Jackson como um escritor de ficção científica e que admira seu trabalho. Depois disso, Jackson e as crianças
Hellman contacts an Indian astrophysicist, and the data indicates that the destabilization of the Earth's crust has begun worldwide. This means that the evacuation of people to arks must start immediately. Hellman promises that a plane will soon pick up Satina and her family. Jackson's children are bored at the camp, and he can't find a way to connect with them. Later they go to bed, and Jackson spots a crazy radio host named Charlie, broadcasting from his van. Charlie talks about the imminent end of the world and engages Jackson in conversation about his seemingly crazy idea that the government is hiding the truth from the people, and only a few selected individuals will survive. Anyone who recently suspected a secret operation has been eliminated by the authorities. Charlie even has a map showing the locations of the arks, but Jackson doesn't believe his words, thinking it's just nonsense, and he returns to his tent. The next day, the earthquakes intensify, and Jackson's ex-wife, Kate, urgently asks for the children to be brought home. Meanwhile, Call informs the President of the United States that only 4 arks have been constructed so far, which means it won't be possible to save a sufficient number of people. Hellman addresses the heads of state with a report on the deteriorating situation. and the President of the United States announces immediate evacuation to the ships. Jackson hands over the children to his wife and rushes to work. He works as a driver for the Russian oligarch named Yuri Karpov, who has tickets for the Ark. Karpov receives an evacuation message and urgently asks Jackson to take his twin sons to the airport. One of the boys accidentally reveals to Jackson about the massive ships on which they will survive the disaster. Jackson immediately recalls the words of the eccentric Charlie and begins to believe in the end of the world, seeing the strange situation in the city. He quickly rents an airplane at the airport and rushes to pick up his family.
A princípio, Kate não acredita nele, mas quando o político afirma na TV que o pior já passou,
another extremely powerful and continuous earthquake with a magnitude of 10.1 begins immediately. Jackson arrives at that moment, and the family quickly agrees and jumps into his car. Los Angeles is being completely destroyed before their eyes, with houses collapsing and entire blocks sinking into the ground. Jackson accelerates the car, navigating through various obstacles in his path. Overpasses, buildings, and cars are falling in front of him, but he manages to dodge them. At one point, he even drives through a massive building that collapses entirely. Finally, the family miraculously reaches the airport, where they discover that the pilot of the airplane Jackson had rented is now dead. Fortunately, Jackson recently took some flying lessons, and he is able to pilot the plane. Together, they manage to get the plane into the air just in the nick of time. The city is experiencing the unimaginable, and it seems unlikely that anyone can survive this unprecedented disaster. Soon, not only Los Angeles but also other cities along the coast become submerged. Jackson assures the family that they need to fly to Yellowstone to get a map from Charlie with the locations of the arcs. The airplane with Jackson's family manages to land in Yellowstone after a while to refuel. At this moment, Jackson rushes to find Charlie, and his daughter insists on going with him. Charlie is not in the van because he is already preparing for the end of the world on a nearby mountain. Jackson then takes Charlie's vehicle and sets out to search for him. After a moment, he manages to find him and asks him where the map is. At this instant, thousands of birds frantically show them that something terrible is about to happen. Charlie then reveals the location of the map and urges Jackson to flee, but he is determined to stay and witness everything up close on the mountain. Jackson then rushes back to the van and speeds to reach Gordon and the others on the plane. Charlie remains there amidst an erupting supervolcano and ends up being killed in the process. In Yellowstone, the real apocalypse begins, during which Jackson drives at high speed to reach the others. Gordon is already preparing for takeoff as it's no longer safe to stay there. Finally, after dodging debris from the volcano explosion and almost getting killed, Jackson arrives. After instructing his daughter to board the plane, he returns to the van to find the map. Once he has it in his hands, he runs just in time to reach the plane that is already taking off. Miraculously, Gordon manages to steer the plane away from the massive explosions. Jackson examines the map and discovers that the arcs are in China. In this case, they will need a larger plane to fly there. Meanwhile, Hellman calls his father and warns him about the imminent disaster, even though it's prohibited. However, his father is determined to stay, asks him not to worry, and emotionally bids farewell to his son. Call keeps the truth even from his mother, claiming that she would refuse to evacuate even if he told her. On TV, the massive destruction happening worldwide can be seen, and thousands of people, devastated by the terrible events, gather to pray together in complete hopelessness. Seeing all of this, Hellman finds it unacceptable to continue hiding the truth from the people. But Call is strongly against making exaggerated statements until the chosen ones are on board the arcs. Call insists on the immediate evacuation of the president, but he retreats to the chapel and refuses to speak to anyone except Hellman. They then have a sincere conversation, and President Wilson believes that he hasn't done enough to save the people and decides to decline evacuation to share the fate of his people. He tells Hellman to board the plane, saying something truthful that in this new world they are about to venture into, a young scientist is worth much more than 20 old politicians. At the Las Vegas airport, the oligarch and his family haven't departed yet because their plane got stuck in a giant crater. Firefighters arrive, shouting that a mega ash cloud from the supervolcano is approaching the area and instructing everyone to take shelter. Hellman arrives at the evacuation plane, where the president was supposed to be, and reports to everyone that he refused to leave. Then, Call takes command. stating that the vice president died in the crash of his helicopter due to the eruption's ash clouds. An argument ensues between Hellman and Call, where Hellman is perplexed by the arrogance and rigidity of the head of the presidential administration, who, in turn, believes that excessive sentimentality will hinder the salvation of humanity. The president's daughter, Laura Wilson, also takes a seat on that plane. She bids a sad farewell to her father and accepts his decision to stay. President Wilson then addresses the nation live to reveal everything and declares that he will be with them, contradicting Call's assumptions. It can be seen that this did not lead to the anticipated riots. At that moment, the plane under Gordon's control arrives at the Las Vegas airport, but all flights have been canceled, and they have no idea how to travel to China. Jackson then sees Karpoff's family in line and, upon learning that Karpoff has tickets for the Ark, begs his former employer to take his family with them. At this moment, Karpoff's personal pilot named Sasha finds a functioning plane and is ready to fly it. However, they lack a co-pilot. Seeing the opportunity, Jackson suggests that Gordon knows how to pilot and could be the co-pilot. They then rush towards the enormous aircraft, the N-500, which is transporting luxury cars. Despite the controller's prohibition and the damaged runway, Sasha and Gordon manage to get the plane off the ground.
Meanwhile, a Buddhist monk named Nima receives a letter from his brother who works in the construction of the arks. His brother reveals the truth about the construction site, saying he has discovered a way to enter the Ark without tickets, and he asks Nima to bring the entire family to the base. The young monk tells his teacher about this and sets out to fetch his grandparents. The White House is covered in ash, and several people are taking refuge in it. However, everyone maintains a dignified appearance until the last moment and helps each other. President Wilson decides to help a little girl find her father, and the Prime Minister of Italy also stayed at home and devoted his remaining time to prayers. But soon, a terrible earthquake strikes the Vatican, burying millions of people. Continents start moving rapidly, causing massive tsunamis worldwide. One of them hits a cruise ship, where Hellman's father was, causing it to capsize completely. Another tsunami strikes Washington, and along with countless people, President Wilson dies there. Dr. Hellman reports that the base with the arks will also be submerged in 6 hours. He also observes that the Earth's crust has shifted significantly, with the South Pole now located in Wisconsin. Aboard the N-500, Jackson and Kate have a meaningful conversation and forgive each other for past grievances. Sasha reports that the fuel is running out, which means an emergency landing will be necessary soon due to the shifting continents. Their plane arrives much earlier than expected at its destination, flying over the Himalayas not far from the right location. However, the plane loses its engines, and finding a place to land in the Tibetan mountains becomes impossible. Sasha asks everyone to get into one of the cars and leave the rear cargo area of the low-flying plane. Everyone exits the plane except Sasha, who heroically continues to pilot it. The N-500 teeters on the edge of an abyss and eventually crashes, resulting in Sasha's death. Chinese cargo helicopters fly over the survivors, carrying animals to the arks. One of the Chinese pilots notices the group and lands. Karpoff shows the Chinese pilots the boarding passes for himself and his children, and they are taken on board, while the others are left to freeze in the mountains. The group wanders among the mountains and spots a moving car. Jackson frantically waves his arms and asks the driver to stop. The driver of the car is the Buddhist monk Nima. He picks up the fellow travelers, and together they head to the valley. Call, who has arrived at the arks, is informed that one of the 4 ships is out of service, and it was this ark for which Karpoff had tickets. Hellman and Laura had become friends and asked Call how people were selected to board the ships. Only now does Call tell them that tickets were sold only to wealthy individuals, and no effort was made to create the best genetic population for repopulating the planet. Hellman enters the cabin and realizes that it can accommodate not just him but 10 people. At that moment, the astrophysicist Saturn calls him on the phone, and it turns out that the airplane did not pick him and his family up. Saturn reports another massive tsunami approaching from the east, and in deep sadness and shock, he bids farewell to his friend and tragically dies with his family and everyone else who was there. Hellman, furious and in a panic, rushes to input new data and reports that there is only half an hour left before the wave hits the arks. At the same time, Nima's car arrives at the base gates. His brother Dean refuses to take anyone besides his family, but Kate pleads with Nima's grandmother to at least take the children with her. After looking at her great-aunt, he insists that everyone should be taken, and he reluctantly agrees. At the base, the ticket holders for the defective Ark realize they are being abandoned. Under Karpov's leadership, the desperate crowd rushes to the nearest functioning Ark, coincidentally the one where Hellman is. However, the Ark's doors have already been closed on Call's orders. Tim Andam silently leads the group through an alternate path within the Ark. On the way, they notice Karpov and his children unable to get in. There is a terrible commotion at the disembarkation area next to the Ark. Many people cannot hold on and fall into the abyss. Hellman cannot remain indifferent to this and addresses the leaders of all countries, requesting approval to open the door so that those still outside can enter the Ark. Call interrupts his speech and draws the attention of the politicians to the fact that there are 15 minutes left before the wave hits them. In his opinion, it is much more important to ensure the safety of those already aboard the ship because he is not the one outside. However, Hellman convinces the leaders that the future cannot be built on so much brutality. In the end, everyone agrees to open the door. However, this puts Jackson's group, who were still wandering in the inner corners of the Ark, in danger. The movement of the gate's lifting mechanism throws Dean and Gordon among the huge rotating gears. Dean is severely injured in the leg, but Jackson saves him. However, Gordon slips from Jackson's grip and cannot hold on. Gordon is ruthlessly crushed by the gears. Additionally, a thick cable gets stuck and interrupts the movement of the mechanism. Due to this, the gate jams and does not fully open. Nevertheless, people rush inside the ship quickly. 4 minutes remain before the wave hits, and everyone is inside except Karpov and his children. At the last moment, Karpov manages to throw his children into the closing gate while he himself falls into the abyss. Due to the same cable stuck in the gears, the gate also does not fully close. Hellman notices Jackson's children in the compartment next to the lifting mechanism, recognizes them, and goes along with the mechanism specialist to the location. 1 minute remains before the wave hits, and the gates are still half open. The massive wave approaches the Arks and sweeps everything in its path. Water enters the Ark, and the safety system locks some compartments, particularly the one where Jackson's family is located. It is now flooded with water. The Ark loses its supports, and the engine cannot be started while the gates are open. The ship moves uncontrollably until it hits another Ark with no further serious damage. It is then carried through the massive waves, heading straight for Mount Everest. If the engine cannot be started, the collision and destruction of the Ark will be inevitable. Hellman cannot reach Jackson but communicates with him through the compartment communication. He explains how to unlock the lifting mechanism and why it is important to do so immediately. Jackson understands that descending into the completely flooded compartment is suicidal, but seeing the immense need for it, he decides to take action. However, he is quietly followed by his son. Jackson instructs the boy to light the way with a flashlight while he himself starts pulling the cable with his son's help. After much determination, he succeeds. The gate finally lowers, and the engine is started. However, the Ark is heading towards the mountain at a very high speed. At least the speed is reduced enough to prevent a severe collision, but enormous rocks roll down the mountain, nearly destroying the Ark. At the last moment, the Ark goes into reverse and moves away from the mountain. Jackson finally manages to get out of the submerged part after his son, and he is joyfully welcomed by everyone celebrating their survival. Time passes, and on the 27th day of the first year after the end of the world as we know it, the waters recede. Satellites send images of the Earth's surface, and now the mountains in southern Africa have become the highest point in the world, no longer Mount Everest. The Arks with their hundreds of thousands of survivors set a course for there. The doors open, and people step onto the deck to admire the new world. And that's it, folks. We've reached the end of another incredible movie. Leave a like and subscribe to the channel.